Do you not see that this is the most important thing? And do you see how the mind thinks there's 1,000 other more important things? Not seeing that everything comes from this? All of your difficulty and all of those things speaks to the simplicity of this misunderstanding. And as you heal this misunderstanding, it impacts every single area of your life. Do you see the invitation for devotion and say, oh my God, this is what it's about. This is what's actually important. This is my heart. This is my life. Why would you not give yourself to this? Because I'm afraid of not being enough. The fascinating thing that I find about fear is the infinite stories we can tell about what we're afraid of. And yet, underneath all of those stories, it can all be boiled down to the same fear. Not necessarily the same story, but the same essence. And so rather than trying to overcome the myriad of stories we tell about fear, we can go to the real heart of the matter. And is it really overcoming? Is it really conquering the fear? I don't really see it that way. What I see it as is acknowledging the truth of the fear. The fear is a flavor of resistance. Whatever we are fearing, we are resisting something. And the closer you get to what the fear really is, you can get to the reality of what you're resisting rather than being lost in the story of resisting. Let's just find a point of agreement about what it is we're afraid of. Let it be meditative. We don't have to spin in our mind trying to figure out what it is. But it's like feeling into the heart and allowing all the stories to calm down, and you just get in touch with the truth of the matter, which is really something that's felt. Do you see this like all the different stories? But really it's one thing. We can say, I'm afraid of this not happening, and I'm afraid of this not happening. I'm afraid this might happen. But what is it really? And if we say, I'm afraid of not being in control, well, in control of what and for what purpose? Do you see that underneath all fear is a fear of loss? Like if we're afraid of losing control, we're afraid of losing something that we're trying to control. So it's not really the loss of control. It's the loss of the thing that we're trying to hold on to. And if we say it's a fear of death, what do we think we're going to lose in death? If we say it's afraid of what other people might think of us, what do we lose if they think of us a certain way? And this is playfully difficult to put into words because it's not really the words. The words are just pointers. In some way, using words to point to it, we can say we fear the loss of who we are thought to be, which could also be said as we fear the loss of an idea about ourselves, which could also be the idea of ourselves that we're chasing. And this is endlessly fascinating to me. I mean, not only do I see it play out in my life, but I see it play out in everyone I talk to. It's like it's just the same fear. It's the same human experience. We're all just telling a different story about it. And can we acknowledge that the adorable difficulty that arises in our human experience is birthed because there is this fear? Can you see that every emotional disturbance you might have, from minor irritation to dramatic heartbreak, it requires fear? This single fear. How deeply honest can we get about this fear? And in that honesty, can we let go of what we pretend the fear is about? Because this is what we do. We tell these stories of fear which project the fear onto something in the world, onto something out there, when really it's not about that. It's like saying, I'm afraid of what other people are going to think. Well, that's the story we tell. But what are you really afraid of? And this inquiry, it really demands a radical honesty, which is interesting because in our projection of blame, we're trying to avoid this depth of honesty, which is why in appearances, this is difficult. You can see how raw it is, how exposing it is to get that honest about it. But as with everything, whatever it is that's asking for healing, if we're not willing to look at it, there's no chance of healing. And so this invitation to radical self-honesty is a requirement, which is amazing because we spend our lives running away from it. And it could be said as a pointer that ultimately what we are afraid of is the truth. You know, in a religious context, it's kind of like saying we're only afraid of God. We're only afraid of the truth of life. Because as human beings, we are in a relative constant state of resistance against life. We're fighting life. We're fighting the truth. Kind of like wanting what we want rather than letting the truth be the truth. And this confrontation, this resistance, ultimately creates some flavor of hell. This resistance is fear, and you can see that the hell state, the suffering state, is fueled by fear. It is our fear that prevents us from entering a flavor of heaven. Because where there is no fear, there's only heaven. Which is to say, love is all that remains. This whole session right now can just be a meditative moment to face the real issue. That's why I don't see it as overcoming fear, which is almost like trying to get control. And what I see as the real path of liberation is seeing that there's no need for control. Because the thing I'm fighting for is impossible. Because in my fight, I'm trying to win over what's true. And that's not going to happen. What is the truth that we are so afraid of? And I'm going to speak about this in a way that I've spoken about it 1,000 times. So for many, I'm just repeating myself, which is a gift that it's always the same thing. And of course, I'm using silly words to point to something beyond words. But if we look at the real essence of our difficulty, the real essence of our fear for every human being, in some way we can say it's a fear that I'm not enough. It's a fear that I'm incomplete. And this is either a fear that I won't be enough, a fear that I'm not enough, a fear that I wasn't enough. This whole fear thing is wrapped around a sense of worth and value for a personal sense of identity. You can see this struggle where this perceived self we are is on an epic quest of trying to become enough. In this epic quest is essentially signifying that I'm afraid of not being enough. And it's wild how much this fuels our activity as human beings. How much of our time is spent trying to conquer that, trying to become enough. And what's wild about it is, in the appearance of becoming enough, we simply find a story to tell that says we're enough, but the story fades and we have to do it all over again. This is kind of what keeps us trapped in a cycle of chasing achievement, chasing validation. You get it in appearances and it feels good for 15 minutes and it fades. And you think, oh, I found it. It's gone now, so I got to go find it again. And it just perpetuates an unending cycle. Can we find agreement in that? That it's a fear of not being enough? And even in the fear of death, we can see that in some way, death is that finish line that we are afraid of arriving because we haven't yet completed the journey of becoming enough. It's like a deadline, and we feel so far behind. And we can even associate it to our fear of the unknown, because the unknown jeopardizes our quest of becoming enough. It introduces an element of the absence of control because of the unknown. Do you see how the unknown threatens the quest? It's like there's too many unknown variables in order to maintain the illusion of being enough. And it's why we're so bothered with what everyone else is doing, because it makes it difficult to continue that quest. It's like there's a voice that says, if only everyone did what I wanted them to do, then I could get to this place in the future where I know I'm enough. Do you see how insane that is? And it really speaks to the disastrous energy behind this quest, where it wants everyone to be its prisoner so that it can fulfill this quest. If everyone just did what I wanted them to do, which is if everyone wasn't free to be themselves. Do you see the violence in that? This is wild as well, where we would want to withhold that freedom from people so that we can maintain an image of ourselves as enough. Do you see this battle against the truth that people are free, against the truth that people are not here to worship you? Because that's what we're asking them to do when we say, be how I want you to be. It's saying, let me be your master, so that it will help me avoid what I'm afraid of. So it will help me maintain an imaginary sense of self-importance, which is like saying, helping me maintain an idea that life is about me. Isn't that wild? And do you see how we just create hell in the process? Do you see the more you want to control others, the more of a hell you create for yourself? Same with wanting to control life. Do you see the constant state of resistance when you're trying to control something? Because when you're trying to control something, there is so obviously a fear of losing the control, which is interesting because the statement that says, I want control, is also a statement that says, I don't have control, which is also to say, I'm afraid of not having control. Why do you want control? For what purpose? And is it for a purpose other than satisfying your attempt to become enough? You see, as I mentioned earlier, this fear is to fear what is true. And one of the most direct ways to say this is that this fear that we have of not being enough, for the one who fears, it's true that it is not enough. But what we don't see is that the one that fears not being enough isn't really you. And this speaks to the whole dilemma of being human, where we are lost in this character that we call the ego. And it's the ego that's trying to become enough. And the ego is not enough because the ego is not real. And that's its whole quest, is to become real, which is to say, become validated, which is to say, to be proven to be important. And you see, this ego character is very simply an idea of yourself, an idea of yourself as separate from everything else. And this is birthed through a sincerity within the human being that is asking the question, what am I? And the challenge here is, in our attempt to answer the question, what am I? We use the tool of the mind to create an image of a self, a story of a self. And then we think we are that story. And yet that story is only existing in imagination. And so, of course, that story of a self is not enough because it's not real. It will eternally feel inadequate, even underneath all of its pretending to be real. And this is underneath all suffering, which is not a popular thing to say when somebody is suffering, which is why we don't say this to other people. We use this insight to look at our own direct experience and get honest about what's going on. And in all of the suffering that I've experienced and continue to experience, when I look deeply, this is exactly what's going on. I'm suffering over an idea of myself that is afraid of not being enough, that is looking at circumstance and telling a story that says this means I'm not enough. In everything I'm afraid of losing, underneath that story of what I fear losing is a loss of an idea about myself, one that is trying to be built and held up in the world, an idea that I'm trying to protect, that wants to be seen by others a certain way, and that fears being seen a certain way. This is also the fear of judgment, to be judged and seen as not enough. Do you see that whole adventure in the mind is simply trying to protect an idea of yourself? This isn't wrong. It's not bad. Just look at the mechanism and see if you can see the truth in it. The invitation to see the truth of it isn't to overcome anything. It's to acknowledge the truth of the matter and surrender the impossible fight. It's like I talk to people all the time, and whether it's about them building a business, whether it's about their family, whether it's about all of the noise in their mind, the problematic aspect of their journey is this fear. And the door that I'm attempting to walk them through is some flavor of surrender of this character and giving themselves back to the heart of life. Which, in a religious context, again, to talk about this in a way that uses spiritual language, it's like letting God be God and stop trying to pretend that who you think you are is God. And this is difficult because we don't see God, which is just another way of saying we don't see the truth of life. We don't see the extent of the miracle that we're swimming in. We don't see how deeply connected we are to everything. It's like, in one way, we don't perceive a safety in surrendering. Like, is it really okay to just let go? Is it really okay to let people just think what they're going to think? Is it really okay to let the outcome be whatever the outcome is? Is it really okay to just be present? Is it really okay to just love? You see, all of these questions are adorable in nature, partly because of how immense the miracle is that is only love, which is kind of like saying, and again, it's silly words, but it's kind of like saying how real God is. And again, that can get so confused because God is not your idea of God. God is not your conditioning of God. See, all of this, the truth of this is outside the mind, and the human being exists in the mind. And the more you see the truth of the matter, which is like facing the thing you're afraid of, seeing it more clearly, then you realize the thing you're afraid of is actually in great service to the truth of what you are, which is so funny because we are fighting a love. We are fighting a goodness. in service of protecting an idea about ourselves that simply isn't real at all and doesn't offer you anything of substance. And when we're lost in that illusion, that can sound like nonsense. When we're lost in the illusion of the world where we think people thinking about you means something about you, where we think a particular flavor of success in the world means something about you, it's amazing how real that can seem. And it's so illusionary in nature. This is what inspires the spiritual search, is we run around in the world's illusion. We thought we knew what we were doing. We thought we knew where we were going. And then we get there, or we do the thing, and we're like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Yeah, because it's an illusion. And so spirituality is an invitation or a doorway to kind of step out of that illusion and come home to what's true, which is terrifying for the ego because it's inviting it to give up its quest, the quest that it has been conditioned to go on. It's kind of like this quest that says, if only I can find 1 million people to like me, then I'll be enough. And you can see where there's something that deeply believes that and is afraid of surrendering that agenda because it holds on to the hope that it might be true, because it's been conditioned to think that that's the answer. And, it can be that, or it can be 1,000 other things. But you can see that it's what you've been told. You've been told by the world, if you be what I want you to be, then I'll love you. And so we effort our way towards being how we think we should be in order to get the love we're seeking. And that love essentially is the conclusion of being enough. And do you see how all of this is projected into the future? This love from the world, which is illusionary, says, I will love you if. And so we're chasing the if. But the statement of, I will love you if, says, I don't love you right now. That is not love. That is love being weaponized. And then, of course, because we've been taught this, we use the same weapon towards other people and the world. We say to God, I will love you if. We say to other people, I'll love you if. And this if is, if you validate my imaginary sense of self-importance, if you help me protect the illusion of myself. It's so wild to see how deeply true that is and how often we do that. Where if we're ever withholding love from someone or something, it's because it threatens an idea about ourselves that we're trying to hold on to, which really shows you this sacred space that we're invited to step into, where there is only love and there's simply no reason to withhold love, and therefore love is always flowing. Because we don't need to defend this idea of ourselves. We don't need to get anywhere in the future in order to be whole and complete, because in seeing the truth of what you are, that's already done. And it's funny because the ego, as much as it says it's looking for wholeness, it doesn't want to find it because it wants the search. It wants something to chase after. It wants the I'm almost there. Because if the ego finally found it, then it would be out of a job. And so it creates this elaborate maze for you to run around in, trying to become enough. And it's unending. You see, if you talk to anyone who, let's say, is grounded in a wholeness, it's not that they reached a particular destination, it's that they gave up the search. They stopped chasing things. They realized they didn't matter. They realized that what really mattered in some way was simply here and now. And so often I encounter people who are trying to conquer this sense of inadequacy. And sometimes they're quite shocked at my recommendation, which is not to conquer it at all, but to come to terms with the truth of it. It's like it transforms from an enemy into a friend. When I have that voice creep up that says, "Tiger, you're not enough," I say, "Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that who I think I am is not enough." If you try to control something that is not for you to control, you will feel like you're not enough. And so if ever you feel like you're not enough, you're simply trying to do something that's impossible. There's an invitation to let go of that impossible agenda and simply come back to the real heart of the opportunity in doing whatever you're doing. For example, and I love just looking at the present moment of things, there's always such wisdom in that. Like in doing the work that I do, coming here, saying these words, if there's any agitation, if there's any fear, it's because of that confusion that's trying to be enough or is afraid of not being enough. And you can see that this confusion is misinterpreting the opportunity that I have, or the confusion says, what I'm doing is about me being enough. And that pain or that alarm that says I'm afraid of not being enough is an invitation to lay down that quest and just come back to the heart of the opportunity, which is simply to be here and be honest with you. Which is simply to be here and speak from my heart. Do you see how this applies to everything? Do you see how it applies to relationship? It's the same mechanism. And I see this so clearly in all of my relationship interactions throughout my whole life. Whenever that fear of inadequacy arises, I'm trying to use the situation to maintain an idea about myself. And that's not really the opportunity in the relationship. It's almost like you have a partner who's upset and bothered, and there can be a defensiveness that arises. And that defensiveness is so obviously an attempt to protect an idea about yourself. And then that defensiveness pushes away the other person. When really the opportunity in surrendering that idea about yourself is to hold space for what's happening. And that holding space can be so beautifully loving. And that actually nurtures the relationship. It invites a deeper depth and intimacy, which is a great doorway into the thing you would actually enjoy. Do you see the disaster here? How we are pushing away the real thing that we crave, which in one way we can simply say is love and connection, because we're trying to survive this imaginary sense of self-importance. This is incredibly universal. It's like the real thing that you are here to melt into is constantly available. But we don't allow ourselves to melt into it because we're trying to protect this character. Which is what's so beautifully fascinating, is that there is this depth of love and connection, always available, always here. It's not in the future. It's simply rested behind our agenda. And so the only way to access it is to surrender the agenda and come home. And we don't do that by conquering the fear. We do that by surrendering to the truth, which in some way is recognizing that, oh, this isn't about me. Look at that in everything that bothers you. Do you see that you're taking something personally? Do you see that to take something personally is to associate it to the idea of yourself? And do you see that in taking something personally, you're making it personal? You're making it about you, which is to say, to make it about the idea of yourself. Isn't that wild? And it's not really. What an epic pointer to get out of the way. This is so loud in society. When you really see this deeply, you see it playing out everywhere. And there's so many stories that say it's something other than this. And there's really this profound simplicity. Profound simplicity. It's only this. And our complexity is simply trying to avoid the simplicity. Our complexity tells so many stories, when really life and being human is a beautiful and simple gift. Which is kind of like saying how simple and beautiful life can be when you let God be God, and how complicated and painful it can be when you try to be God. So open the eyes of your heart, please, and at least be open to see what God has created, what is actually true about life behind all of the mental commentary, which is also like saying, see the truth of what you are beyond all of the ideas you have about yourself, which are really just a collection of judgments. My goodness, I love my job. I am so honored to hold this space with you. How amazing is that we get to take a moment and, to whatever degree that we can, just see it more clearly, which always points you back to more love. How blessed are we? And if we can't see how blessed we are, see that you're clinging to an idea about yourself. And then see how adorable that is. Don't make it serious, because it's not serious at all. The confusion, the misunderstanding is incredibly innocent, which is like saying there's no judgment, which is also like saying it's not personal. Because if you're not rested in that adorableness, you can see that you're taking the confusion personally. And it's not. Do you not see that this is the most important thing? The simplicity of this discovery? And do you see how the mind thinks there's 1,000 other more important things in your life? Not seeing that everything comes from this? We can say, well, I got to become more focused in work. I've got to learn to treat my partner better. I got to be a better parent, yada, yada, yada. All of your difficulty and all of those things speaks to the simplicity of this misunderstanding. And as you heal this misunderstanding, it impacts every single area of your life. Do you see the invitation for devotion? The invitation to surrender the future outcome that you're chasing and say, oh my God, this is what it's about. This is what's actually important. This is my heart. This is my life. This is what's true. Why would you not give yourself to this? Because I'm afraid of not being enough. And this is simply trying to show you that the truth of what you are is enough. And what a transformation of life, of a lived human experience, to live from a place that knows you're enough and that knows there's nothing in the world that can take that from you. Do you see that transformation? Do you see how dramatically different the landscape of life becomes? Where your life now unfolds in an opportunity to give, to play, which is to find some avenue of loving on people. That's what life becomes about. Because you've recognized the depth of this love inside of what you are. And because you realize nothing is missing, what else are you going to do other than just love on people? And you find whatever way resonates with you to go do that. And the world is a beautiful landscape for that to happen. Because loving on people in your own particular way is simply a way of adding value to people's lives, which in a simple way is business. And it's amazing that we don't see this because we have these fears of, well, how am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to provide for myself? That's simply in exchange of value, which is, what is your capacity to love on people? Whether you do that in a job, whether you do that in your own business that provides a service, it's simply loving on people. And how difficult that becomes when you can't even be present because you're so afraid of outcome. You're so afraid of not protecting an idea about yourself. You're so preoccupied with controlling other people's thoughts and opinions. It becomes very difficult to deliver real value. I hope you see how important this is, which is also to say how true this is. And then something in your heart opens up and says, okay, let's go. Thanks for hanging out with me today.